joining us for the third of our COVID conversation series. We hope you've enjoyed lunching along with us over the month of July. Today, we're going to talk turkey. And just for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to join us before, I'm going to do a very quick demonstration of how you can communicate effectively with all of our speakers. During this presentation, we do invite you to go ahead, ask questions of our panelists in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you're experiencing difficulty, you can raise a hand. One of our moderators will be happy to try and assist you. If you would like to chat either with the panelists or with other participants, you're more than welcome to use that function. We just ask that you do so respectfully. If you were asking a question, but you wanted to do it anonymously, please remember to hit that button. And if you don't, it will be sent under the name that you are logged in as today. With all of that said, I'm going to launch a very quick poll. And while I do that, just to get an idea of who we've got here and who's joining us, I will mention that our point today, our whole focus, is that we're trying to include discussions and forums to share insights on how the supply chain has been affected. Many businesses have found that new safety procedures lead to new practices. Some are worth keeping, even long after the pandemic. But how do we know which ones? That's where we're trying to share the best practices and speed up that learning curve. Sharing stories of success and challenges, not only important for us in a way of learning from each other, but also to get ahead and better prepared for that potential second wave. I'm going to give you one last second to go ahead and vote on who you are and who's joining us before ending the polling and sharing out that information. So just so everybody has some idea of who's joining us today, here are the results from our poll. So when you're chatting with other participants, this is your audience. Without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and move in to our panel today. Now, we do have one person who has had to step away from their video for a moment. However, she will be back. We have with us Dave Delbridge from Hensel District Co-op. I also, joining us right now, have Dr. Anastasia Novi from Guelph Poultry Veterinary Services and Stephen Roach from Acer Consulting. Stephen is going to kick us off on this webinar today by presenting resilience, sustainability, and goal setting. Yes, even a pandemic still means that these things are important. I would like to thank all my panelists for joining and taking the time to share your stories. And with that being said, Stephen, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, PAC, for having me today, and thank you all for joining. It's a pleasure to have the chance to chat with you a little bit today. Just bear with me as I share my screen here, and I'll get going with my short presentation. So, as Charlotte mentioned, my name is Stephen Roach. For those of you that don't know me, I have a master's and PhD in epidemiology from the University of Guelph, and I own and operate an animal health research consulting company called Acer Consulting. We're based here in Guelph and do quite a bit of work with the various livestock and poultry commodities here in Ontario, as well as across Canada and abroad as well. We do a number of different things, but animal health and welfare is really sort of the name of the game for me when it comes to research. And I'm also very passionate about extension methods, understanding producer and advisor mindset, and trying to work as a team to achieve whatever health outcomes or welfare outcomes we're looking for. So really interested and excited about some of the changes that are happening across the country right now, in relation to how we can be more resilient and more sustainable long term. Now, I was asked when I was approached to speak today to sort of give a bit of an epidemiologist perspective on what's going on, not to get into the details by any means, and certainly recognizing that I'm not an infectious disease epidemiologist specializing in COVID-19. That said, I just want to sort of set the stage, if you will, for our other speakers to talk a little bit more specifically about how this is affecting turkeys, specifically here in Ontario. So for me, I'm just going to touch on, where have we been, what's happening today, and set the stage again for where we're headed. I think it's a little interesting that, February 5th, I was in the British Columbia speaking to the Ministry of Agriculture, and this was a slide that I used when I was talking about current diseases that might be affecting supply chains in our world, and I talked about coronavirus. At the time, more than 20,000 cases in China. We had over 500 deaths and counting, and it was really starting to become, fairly concerning for the eastern part of the world. It was declared a public health emergency, and I commented a lot on, hey, we have serious post-SARS concern. A lot of people worried about the potential for this to become what we now know and are living in as a pandemic. Fast forward to where we are today, July 28th, and I just pulled this from Google. These are statistics for my region, Waterloo region, in Canada, Ontario, Canada, and worldwide. And obviously, as we know, this has really ballooned into a fairly unprecedented and massive situation, a public health situation for us that's affecting most sectors and most commodities around the world. So why do we see this happen? Well, disease spread now more than ever has been so much easier. People, animals, diseases are moving faster and farther than ever before. They don't abide by boundaries, by borders, by anything like this. Two examples on the left-hand side here, you've got a simulation showing real data of just in Ireland, cattle movement in 2016. We have over 1.3 million events, 6.7 million cattle moving around the country. And you can imagine if we mapped this out for poultry or any other species, frankly, here in Canada, it'd be pretty similar. On the right, you see world air traffic in a 24-hour period. We are moving people, animals, and things all over the world on a consistent basis. And so it's not surprising that the pandemic potential for things like avian influenza or other types of viruses like COVID have been able to achieve the detrimental effects they have. And we're seeing rapid response. This is showing a timeline of just the province of Ontario and how they've dealt with COVID situation from late January up until early April. All of the various policy, legislative actions that have been taking place over this time to try and manage the situation. Things are happening in real time, and we very often don't have a sense for what the next week is going to bring. When we look at Ontario's action plan, we're seeing that through March into July, they've got a 3-step phase, and we're in stage 3 of phase 2 in most cases, but we're still a lot of uncertainty, right? We're not exactly sure where we're headed or the results of the actions that are being taken today. So there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of concern, and we still need to make real-time decisions about how we're managing in the barn with our teams or with other up and down the supply chain. So what are some of those concerns and how might they be affecting your business and our supply chain? From a health response perspective, we had concerns from access to the right tools, the right equipment, to testing, to do we have a vaccine or can we develop a vaccine, to talking about other preventative strategies that might keep us all safe. Herd immunity was talked about a lot, and from an epidemiological standpoint, we know that this really isn't going to be the tool that we're going to be after. We need some sort of vaccine for us to be able to get back to life as we know it. And we also need everybody to buy into the fact that we need preventative strategies, basic hand washing and hygiene practices, mask wearing, right? The constant debate that seems to be happening around the general public, screening, assessing for symptoms, and then basic practices around social distancing, isolation if we're and quarantining if we're test positive. Things that now, as all of us as business owners, need to take into account, both for our families and our personal situation, as well as for our businesses. Public buy-in, as we don't have to look too far to the south to see serious effects associated with public buy-in of this situation. Are people following protocols or best recommended practices? And things like the anti-vaxxer movement. If we get a successful vaccine, there was a report that came out yesterday that likely only 50% of Canadians would be open to using or taking that vaccine. We have concerns, potentially short and long-term, associated with managing this disease. I don't have to say or belabor this too much. Communication, whether it's our leaders from other jurisdictions, or other public health departments, are giving mixed messages or not always giving the information that allows us to act with clarity and decisively. And certainly as we bring things closer to home, we're seeing potential disruptions in the supply chain. And certainly in processing, it's a bigger concern, obviously more in the beef and the cattle sector and the hog sector than it is in poultry, but we still see potential disruptions and challenges to food security and our food system as a whole. When we look closer at the poultry sector, we've seen some ebbs and flows. We've also seen some, I think, reasonable responses by the Chicken Farmers of Canada and other groups in order to try and address and deal with this situation. But we're seeing consumption change, and we're seeing patterns in terms of production systems change. And of course, it won't be any surprise that when we look at the effects that this is happening broadly across industries on business, we're seeing major concerns over travel impacts, revenue impacts, new business development, supply chains, and so on. We're seeing dramatic effects that have taken place today or in the last several months, and anticipated effects moving forward into 2021. So we have a lot of ripples going on here that are going to extend well beyond the potential outbreak scenarios that we may be dealing with in different areas. And of course, for all of us that deal with staff, manage individuals, or even within our families, we need to be aware of the mental health and wellness impacts that this situation may be having on various people. And you don't need to look far for statistics on individuals across commodities, again, that are expressing significant concern and fear over what the future holds. So there's a lot of, again, I'm building up to that uncertainty piece. Again, what's remote working look like, right? Everyone's trying to learn Zoom, learn the various strategies that Charlotte's talked about in terms of having effective meetings online. And of course, as we move forward, what does reopening look like? Everything from concerns over a second wave in the fall, to worrying about sports coming back, to worrying about how kids are going to go back to school, and we're going to be able to return men and women back to a regular function in some normal capacity. All of this is boiling up to public, individual, and potentially consumer fear over what's coming, what's next, and where are we headed. So I want to borrow sort of some lessons on how we solve, or we tend to approach solving, complex problems with animal health and disease, and applying this to our business situation. In this case, it's using the One Health model. One Health is trying to understand how we can address disease and health situations that occur at the human, animal, and environmental interface. And we talk about the 3 C's a lot: communicating, coordinating, and collaborating. And for me, that's the key to goal setting, resiliency, and sustainability for our businesses long term. So just briefly, what now? When it comes to communication, my advice is that we need to be constantly preaching clear messages. We need to be considerate about what tools, what methods, what techniques we're using to communicate with our team, but we need to be offering clear and concise and concrete messages about what's being done, and be honest, be transparent about what's happening. We need consistency. We need to provide daily or weekly updates, formal and informal, with our team, and have opportunities to build those relationships and build the trust that we're doing everything we can within our area in the supply chain. It's got to be collaborative. We need two-way dialogue. We need to allow our staff to provide feedback, and we need to have a coordinated response, a chain of command. Who's responsible for talking to who are the points of contact internally and externally? Goal setting for me is all about strategic planning. Where are we headed? And that's an evaluation of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so I'd encourage you, those that are running businesses or involved in some aspect of the supply chain, to think through, how has this changed for you over the last 5 months, and use this sort of new reality to start planning some scenarios about best and worst case scenarios. Take stock. How are we doing today? How protected is your supply chain moving forward through the rest of 2020 and into 2021? What's your operational capacity, and is it realistic? I want you to consider, or I think you should consider, reevaluating short, medium, and long-term goals in terms of your financial situation, staffing, and operational capacity, and thinking well beyond 2020, as I expect the ripple effects to carry out well beyond there. And just in terms of preparedness, it's thinking through contingencies and backup plans, thinking through protocols. What happens if the best case scenario works? Successful fall reopening, case reduction, and as we move towards the end of 2020, we see a return to well, a positive return, I'll say. Worst case scenario, in the turkey situation, we have a significant second wave. Consumer and food chains are continued to be disrupted, and we have serious impact on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Some obviously big times for us here in the turkey industry. And thinking through operational and financial preparedness, thinking through how are we going to deal with whatever comes with us moving forward in terms of protocols, in terms of working with our advisors, and what are our limiting factors. Financially, how much government support might be available? How can we redistribute or repurpose funds that we have, and how much runway do we have if there's significant operations or interruptions to our operations moving forward? There's lots of mental health resources and support, and I'd encourage business owners to think about this as we work through with staff. And ultimately, I think it's again, thinking back to how can we reflect on where we've been, communicate, coordinate, and collaborate to try and find a successful opportunity for moving forward. So I tried to kind of paint a really quick picture here in terms of some of the things I want you to think about as the next two speakers start to talk and really hone in on the turkey sector specifically. So with that, I won't take up any more time. Thanks very much for your time. Happy to answer questions when appropriate. And Charlotte, I'll kick it over to our next speaker.
Thank you very much. That was amazing, Stephen. I think so many of the points that you shared are exactly what we've been trying to dispel during these series. So things like prevention and getting that buy-in through transparent communication, you know, hitting the nail right on the head there. I do love the 3 C's. I feel like PIC has coordinated it. I leaned on the experts to communicate it. Unfortunately, that collaboration piece is sort of where we have to just leave it up to the individuals involved to now step up and get involved with us and help do those collaborative moves, even if it is with someone that you don't directly work with in the supply chain. Our next speaker is going to be Dave Selbridge from Hensel District Co-op. So Dave, I would like to just invite you to give us kind of that overview. How did Hensel District deal with the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
I've got you off mute now, so you're welcome to speak whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry about that. Technology is great stuff. So, yeah, what did we do? What did we go through? I put some slides together to discuss it briefly. Just to talk a little bit about Hensel Co-op. We're a small independent cooperative, farmer owned in southwestern Ontario with about 30 locations from through Ontario and through Manitoba. We are again farmer owned. We cover every a bunch of different areas. We do obviously animal nutrition, crop services, edible beans and food grade soybeans, energy, freight forwarding and logistics, and we have a grain and ingredient marketing arm. So we kind of touch the farm on many levels, and it's been a good business for the last almost 100 years. So anyway, so what did we do? We kind of decided right off the hop that we had to protect the people when this hit. A lot of contingency planning was done, set out aside. What ifs, right? What if someone catches COVID-19, and then walk through the steps. How do we try to eliminate the risk of exposure at all possible costs? Because we're an essential business, it was critical that we identify those areas and try to do those things. We had to separate and segregate our people. We had more protocols around cleanliness, disinfection, etc. It was important that we limit the traffic into the production facilities. So basically, any staff that could work from home did work from home and continues to work from home, me included. We would there's no entry into our facilities, only the essential personnel's, deliveries, customer sales, everybody's kept outside. We put for delivery for the feed mills, we put porta potties up so that we could continue to service those people and do everything and look after them. You know, paper was left in a vestibule at the mills. It was very much eliminated all that personal contact. We had to ensure shift integrity, eliminate the overlap at shifts, shift changes, which was tough at times, but we were able to manage it. We managed the traffic within the facilities, how people moved in and out of the areas to try to keep it there. As far as customers went, we've gone through the process. We've got a lot of curbside pickup and drop off. It's worked very well to date. So obviously, from a service standpoint, we're doing a lot more email, phoning, Zoom, texts, etc., with all of our customers. It's been a change, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts, but I think things are going pretty well. We then started to run into early on. We ran into ingredient availability issues with the drop in fuel usage. Obviously, corn distillers tended to drop off, so it created a chain reaction. One, we had no corn distillers, and we had a chain reaction of other ingredients because we were looking for other products to put in their place. So anything like wheat shorts, bakery meal, the different types of even corn or wheat became a little bit tight at times. Soybean meal, canola meal, different things. There was a constant interruption there. So then we worked through that area. Now today it's a lot smoother than what it was, but it's going fairly well. Delivery interruptions, right? There was just the logistics arm. So we did a lot of work to manage through that, in the sense that we were working. Our goal was to keep 3 months of inventory of any product other than soft stock, corn and wheat and soybean meal in inventory at all times. And then, of course, came the pricing fluctuations and variability that comes with that. So it's from that standpoint, it was kind of all hands on deck trying to manage through that variability all the time. Then we started to run into, after we kind of worked through those areas, we started to get into customer processing delays at processing plants. Animals, birds held over. Then it became, we had different issues from a nutrition standpoint, delivery and production in the plants, trying to make sure that we kept everybody full and operational, and made sure all the turkeys and livestock were fed. So it was, we worked through that. I would say today things have calmed down considerably, but it's been quite an interesting ride. And for us, there's some financial impacts. I know there's lots of financial impacts on the farm when things are cut back, but we're in the same boat. If you're not feeding your turkeys, we're not feeding them either. So there's a volume cutback, and it's a chain reaction, and you lose efficiencies, right? So it's not really great that way. So overall, what I would say is it's a new, we've gone through a new way of doing things. We continue to do things. We haven't changed much in that respect. It's going a lot better than we originally anticipated. It's obviously been harder on some people than others, but change creates opportunity, and it's all about the proper attitude. So we've been very fortunate, knock on wood. We've had no service issues or interruptions that I'm aware of at this point in time that were of any amount or accord. Luckily, we've had a great team, and they have been absolutely fantastic. They've managed through all the difficulties that we've had and the ups and downs, and have done it with smiles on their face, and everything's been going pretty well. So that's it for me. If anybody's got any questions, I'll be glad to take questions whenever it's deemed reasonable.
Well, thank you very much for opening that up, Dave. I'm sure there will be more questions for you. It certainly was very challenging as things started rolling out. You guys did an amazing job to just keep rolling with it, and like you said, making sure everyone is fed and that things are moving along. It's fantastic. Thank you again for sharing with us. We're going to move on to the next speaker. Anastasia, can you tell me, did COVID-19 really change the way you had to operate?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'll go over a little bit who I am. My name is Dr. Anastasia Noby. I do have a PowerPoint slide, but it's just certain points that I put on a slide, so it's not really necessary to put up. So I did my Bachelor of Science at the University of Guelph and my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine here at OBC. And that was completed in 2018. And since then, I've been here at Guelph Poultry Veterinary Services, working for Dr. Lloyd Weaver, as I'm sure many of you know. And that's been since 2018, so about just over 2 years. And we deal with the health and welfare of turkeys, broilers, layers, breeders, whether that's layer breeders, dual purpose breeders. All right, so the question was, has COVID-19 changed the way that we operate and how? And it definitely has. And the next question after this, and my next slide, but it's the way it hasn't changed. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. But our goal has always been and will continue to be to maintain the poultry health and welfare. So how do we maintain that goal yet, take the precautions necessary to protect ourselves and our staff and our clients, of course. Overall, there's definitely been less contact with producers, techs, salesmen in general. Just because we, in the beginning, we really wanted to limit any contact with other people. We've obviously not allowed anyone to enter our building for non-staff members. And what we've asked is for producers to call ahead for postmortems, or if they wanted to drop off any kind of samples, just call ahead. And that is just for us to obviously know who's out there, but to reduce the traffic at the building, because sometimes, it could be a bit of a social event when people are gathering in the parking lot. So instead of meeting people for postmortems, generally clients, they drop off the samples, and then I'll follow up with the results of the postmortem by telephone. So medications and vaccines or any kind of product, we also we drop them off outside, and then they're picked up without any contact. And generally everyone's been very cooperative with these new measures, and so that's something that we've been really happy about. Everyone's been really, really good with these new precautions. And it is difficult at times, because I know I always like to do the postmortems in front of the producer or the techs, just to kind of let them know what's going on. In this way, I guess I prefer the old method of being able to allow to see people and do the postmortems in front of them, but it's generally been okay this way. So we've needed to be open to new ways to help our clients, and that's been in the form of telemedicine. It's allowed by our governing body, CVO, and what we do is the producer or the tech service person or the salesman will send us pictures of a postmortem of the birds opened up, and we can diagnose from there and prescribe medications. And then those are usually designated for, like, if there's no way the birds can reach our practice, then we can go to telemedicine. It's not the ideal method of diagnosing an issue, but it's kind of better than nothing in certain situations where there's no transportation available. With that, we need frequent checkups, just because there's probably less contact even between the tech and salesman with the producer. So I do check up more often with telemedicine cases. We've also done some web meetings. So instead of in-person meetings with our clients, we generally have been doing these types of webinars, which have been working out pretty well. And of course, these webinars, we often went to conferences for continuing education, which is very important for our profession. And if anything, they've been more available, and the travel time is obviously not an issue anymore. The conference aspect it was nice because you got to see people, you got to meet new people. So maybe that's limited in this webinar style. So I kind of took the questions and asked, like, how did this not change the way we operate? So along with most jobs in agriculture, vet medicine is considered essential, of course. So we already relied on digital record keeping quite a bit before this all happened. So all my medical records and prescriptions, it's all been digital up till now. So working from home has been a little bit more manageable. So that's with remote desktop or cloud services. And biosecurity has always been vital, important to us. Therefore, it wasn't a heavy adjustment to the personal protective equipment that's required. So the masks wearing, obviously we do that a little bit more often now. But going on farm, we always had quite a bit of personal protective equipment just because we deal with poultry diseases, and disinfecting our hands, hand sanitizer has always been a thing in our profession. So yeah, that's about it for this question. I'll get it back to you, Charlotte.
Thanks very much, Anastasia. I will just mention, in the honor of Lunch and Learn, I've got my turkey burger here, although I will wait until I'm off camera to inhale it all because they are that good. But it's funny that you mentioned, the benefits to this new technology kind of free us up in one way. Like I don't have to travel to go to a conference. I can just zoom in on a webinar. But at the same time, those telephone clients can often need more time. So although you save it one place, you just spend it somewhere else. And with that new experience, right? Asking the right questions and being sure that they're really giving you the answer you're looking for.
Yeah. Certain diseases is fine for telemedicine. Other ones, where I'm not quite sure what's going on at first and I have to delve deeper into every single organ, trying to see what's going on. In those cases, telemedicine is a bit limiting. So it's a good introduction into what might be the issue, and it might lead to a treatment and successful treatment. However, it's not something we typically rely on. And it's been more relaxed now. As we go through the phases, it's people are more likely to come to the practice.
Yeah. And you can discourage those social gatherings in the driveway because we're a little more used to. You can't hang out and chat. I can only imagine though, if I called my mechanic and I was like, my vehicle's making this noise and I want to bring it in, but can we do a tele-assessment? How I would have to describe what was going on using nothing more than my words and potentially sound effects probably would not lead him in the right direction. He would still want to run diagnostics. So kudos to you guys for keeping it going and using technology, but also being able to, maintain that relationship. I think in the honor of, that open communication, we're going to go full circle right back to Stephen. And I'm going to pose a question to you. Just if you, had a chance to go back or preparing us for that second wave, if you could just ask people, to do maybe one or two things, what would you ask them to do differently to better prepare, or what should they have done maybe differently in the first round that they can carry on into the second wave?
Yeah, it's I guess that's the question, isn't it, in many ways? And I mean, it's tough to say what could you have done to better prepare for something like this. I mean, it's been so unprecedented and it's something that most people didn't ever anticipate happening the way, and I think most leaders and most decision makers have not anticipated ever needing to enact some of the things that they've had to as well. So from a public health messaging, I'd say wash your hands. If I were talking a little bit more about how might you have been able to set up some processes to be more resilient. It depends on who we're talking to and obviously, their specific role and function within the industry. But for some time now, we've been embracing more online tools and methods for communication. I think strengthening our sort of literacy around communication tools is going to be a big one moving forward, regardless of whatever the new normal looks like. And so I think I'd reemphasize that moving forward. We're all becoming a little bit more comfortable with these tools, but recognizing their limitations and their strengths as well, and trying to be familiar with those as a team is probably key to communication. I'd say having strong strategic focus and business planning is going to be a key one as well. Yes, most of us have been fortunate in being deemed to be essential, but ultimately, how do we continue to operate as an essential business is key. Anastasia and Dave have provided pretty good indications of what's worked for them in terms of being flexible and being nimble. And certainly that's one of the keys, is just being flexible in the first place. But I think that comes with being able to sort of have a laser focus on what are our key core services that we need to maintain and operate, what are the things logistically and operationally that we need to start looking at implementing in order to continue to function and operate. And then I think as well, both, again, I said it before, internally and externally, thinking about trying to enhance or maintain and establish strong relationships with the folks that we work with. So internally, making sure that we're there for our staff, making sure that we're setting up support systems for them, both from a mental wellness perspective as well from a day-to-day, just operationally. Working from home has, as we all know, many different challenges for many different people. Rural internet is obviously a fun one to deal with. So all of these things, how are we supporting our team? I think thinking forward is this is going to go for another 6-8 months as we are today, for example. What's working and what's not working? What are your weak points moving forward as we enter the fall and go into the winter? What is sort of tenuous and you're simply saying to yourself, well, we can hang on, do this a little bit longer. But the reality is if this sinks in and we're going to take a lot more time working remotely, working socially distanced and so on, and I expect we will, what measures are going to have to become a little bit more permanent, or what support structures are you going to need to provide to your team to make sure they don't burn out, or that you can continue to have all of those conversations, strategic and otherwise, in an effective way. So for me, it's revisiting and taking some time, and August might be a good time to do that, is really try and reflect on where have we been, where are we today, where are our weak points moving forward, and then building some planning around that and taking feedback and opportunity to listen to the folks that you work with to try and get collectively a better understanding of what's happening. Those are some of my thoughts anyway about some things that might be able to be considered as you move forward and think through the fall.
It's funny because so far I have kids and I can't even think to the fall because there's this part of me that just doesn't know if I really want things to be open, part-time, full-time, if I think I could survive still living and working at home while homeschooling or schooling from home. But like you said, let's take this time where things are calm and the weather is nice and we can really think through what we might do proactively and how we might react differently, or things, like you said, just things that we did that we can continue doing. And for me, that is routine, routine, routine. I can't give it up or they will just run amok. I do love the whole idea of, and Anastasia touched on it, the customer service piece, and social networking has been a lot more challenging in this circumstance. Dave, I'm just going to very quickly ask you, do you feel that you're still able to offer the same level of customer service?
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. I would suggest, yes, we're able to offer as much customer service as we ever have. A lot of our basic services we've still been able to deliver, whether it's barn walks, vet checks, vaccinating to help with that, those sorts of things. It's just in a different atmosphere, right? We have more of the we just have to be, social distancing, a lot more coordination of time and setting things up. But for the most part, we've been able to manage quite well. I don't think we've had any service interruptions to speak of. It's just a different way of doing it. Instead of producers walking into the feed mill and talking about corn and wheat, we're doing those conversations by telephone or 6 feet apart in the yard, because we just can't afford to risk the critical or the essential staff in the feed mills. So I'm quite surprised, actually, we've been able to do it. It's harder when you're to drive up that laneway today without appointments. So everything's, that part's changed. Just taking a little more planning, a little more coordination. So yeah, it's been okay, really. Knock on wood again.
Yeah, I do appreciate the honesty too, because although it's not ideal and you probably won't stay there and doing that style much longer than you had to, while you're doing it, it's still connecting. There's still that understanding that we all are doing what we have to do. I'm going to circle back to Anastasia and pose that question for you. Do you think that what you've been doing, you will expect to either go back to the old way where unlimited people in the office and much more social and visits to farms and doing, as you said, the postmortems there in front of people? Or do you think that moving forward, this new state, maybe once people understand the method of communication, might save you time and might be the new look?
Well, I do expect to keep most the new practices in place for the time being. You know, as COVID is a concern in society, I don't expect these practices to change. Especially, you know, we want to protect the staff in here, so I'm going to do what I can to make sure they're safe. But even now, I have started to meet people outside on 6 feet away if I wanted to show them exactly what's going on. You know, just because communication is better one-on-one. But I hope to return to more relaxed safety measures. But as long as it's a concern, I'm not sure it's going to come back anytime soon. Honestly, the impact to us is manageable just because we don't have hundreds of people, you know, in the building, and we can stagger our shifts if we have to. Like, to us, like, I really can't complain about the practices that we've had to adapt to compared to other people in the industry. So for now, I think it's going to stay the same. And I was kind of wondering myself, like, is the industry prepared for a second wave? And especially the turkey industry, because Thanksgiving and Christmas is, I think, a big concern on everyone's mind. And also, and that's a lot to do with the processing facilities. And, you know, even if one shuts down, we're so specific for our weight. So say they do light hens or light toms, are they going to be able to process other flocks that are heavy toms, for example? And that's where we come in and maintain that health aspect of it until we figure out what to do with these flocks. So far, I think the industry has done a great job in being able to allocate, you know, where the poultry, where they end up going. But yeah, it's a big concern in our mind. And that's, I guess it's going to be different from company to company as to what they do to prevent these kind of issues from happening. Yeah, I think that's about it.
I think as we all move forward, we consider that hybrid model. We're like, there might be things that I keep from what I've done before. Personally, my dining room desk is not going to be one of those in any way. But will I be in the office every day as I was before? That's yet to be seen. I do look forward to the day when we can all get together and eat lunch together, because it feels a little like I'm just rubbing it in that I have this awesome turkey burger. And I know turkey is definitely concerned about that Christmas, Thanksgiving season. And I'll just take that chance to point out that you don't have to wait for a special occasion. You can do turkey on a Tuesday or any day, and it's still fantastic. So you don't have to hold out. It's not maybe the right answer, but that's what I go with. There's been a lot of information shared today, and a lot of that cross communication, transparency, talking about what we've experienced and what we think we might be moving forward into to get that what worked best really out there in the forefront. Just before as we wrap up, I'm going to ask one more question to each of my panelists, and it's more of a reflection moment. Would you consider that what you've done is good enough and it will sustain through a second wave as long as it needs to be done? It's quite sustainable. Or do you think you might ramp up? Or do you just think that you're going to have to maybe even ramp down a little? What you did was a little overkill, and there are ways that you can bring it back. To get this started, I'm going to start off where we just ended off. So Stacey, I'll ask you to go first.
I think we're probably going to have the same approach, and there are differences in health as we go through the seasons. So as we go from fall to winter, there might be a jump in a certain disease, and that's something that we always have to be prepared for. So I'm crossing my fingers nothing like that happens, but you never know. In the summer so far, I think everyone's doing a really good job in terms of poultry health, so we aren't overwhelmed. So given the fall to winter season, if we are overwhelmed, we're going to have to take a look at what we're doing again, and maybe I'm just wondering like how we would approach that. We know a little bit more about the virus now, and that, you know, masks are protective, not all 100%, but they are necessary, which I find wasn't really as encouraged in March time. So we do know a little bit more compared to what, you know, in March. So certainly we are going to approach it a different way in the beginning. But it's a bit hard to say at the moment, because it's difficult to say what the poultry health is going to be like at the end of the year. You know, if the cases are really ramping up, yeah, my workload might be really high, or it might not actually be that high. So, and that'll have to depend on, you know, that will have to decide how we approach everything. So farm visits, we are open to doing farm visits, and we still do farm visits. But, you know, if it's a really significant issue, we might have to do more of them. And in this way, we're going to do a lot more PPE. We might be writing down, you know, who we're seeing, you know, at what time a little bit more, and following up a little bit more. It's kind of hard to say, but I think we're going to keep most practices the same, at least.
That's awesome. So there are some ideas that might be incorporated in the future, but like you said, staying flexible and really doing what you need to do at the time to keep yourselves and your clients and most of all the birds safe. I'll just see everyone get your flu shot mentioned there too. Let's not add workload for Stacy. Dave, I'm going to move to you next. As far as what you've been doing, you've got those 3 options: ramp it up, hold it tight, maybe even back it off. What do you think you'll be doing in the fall?
I think we're going to be holding it tight. You know, we've set up the protocols in place. It's one thing with livestock versus, say, you know, the cropping business, that sort of thing. It's a different attitude, right? There's a certain amount of biosecurity things that have been placed. To Anastasia's point about she hasn't had, you know, as big of an issue with health as she thought maybe she might, you know, through this season. I think too, we've got a lot less stocking density in a lot of these barns compared to what we've had historically. So I think, guys, if you look at producers' results and performances, biological performances, they're actually doing very well from what I'm seeing. So I think there's some positives coming out of this as well. You know, stocking density, right? So, from a true standpoint, you know, I'm sure there's, to some of Stephen's points, I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there wondering, okay, why did we have all these businesses or all these people working in all these offices before, where now we can all work from, you know, there's a big percentage of us working from home, right? So there's a lot of overhead costs that can get cut, and some benefits that way. So I really don't see a lot of changes in ours in the short term or to the medium term. You know, if once the vaccines start and things loosen up and everybody feels safe, there could be some changes. But today, I'm going to suggest we're going to be hanging tight.
I like that very much, Dave. I'm glad to hear that everyone stayed safe and kept doing what they were doing. Stephen, we're going to wrap it up with you. As you said, you know, looking forward to that medium, long-term goal setting, having that sustainability and resilience in there. I'm sure there are some things that you would like to go back to doing, maybe, you know, travel, but in terms of what you have been doing and how you've been delivering, do you think you would make any changes or just stay the same or even back off?
I think, I guess I'll give a slightly different answer. I think as we move towards the fall, my business and my efforts will probably ramp up a little bit more. And the reason I say that is, you know, we typically travel and spend a lot of time with advisors, farmers, and various organizations that are responsible for working with them. And typically as we move to the fall, we start thinking about meeting season. We start thinking about all those other things that we need to deal with in terms of biosecurity, health and welfare, and production that well, are still taking place, and you know, whether COVID's happening or not. And so I think our efforts online will continue to emerge. I've had, I'd say maybe 15 events that have been canceled outright that were supposed to take place in the last couple of months, and several that were supposed to take place in fall. But I'm encouraged by the fact that we've also got a number of meetings and projects that have transitioned successfully or planned, and I think they will be successful into some form of online engagement. And so there's still opportunities, I think, to build that communication, to facilitate those conversations, to do what we're doing today, learn from one another, how we're all responding, and provide a bit more of that human contact that I think many of us will crave outside of our homes. So from that standpoint, I think we will ramp up, but we'll absolutely, I'd say tighten things up or stay the same when it comes to generally our movement and some of the on-farm work that we tend to do. We're still taking a pretty cautious approach to on-farm activity or working with people one-on-one on a case-by-case basis. So I expect that will be sort of the next 6-month outlook for us.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's amazing. There's been so much speculation on the effect coronavirus was going to have on the poultry industry. And over this series, we've really watched and heard from people involved directly that the actual measures used to mitigate the risk, our pre-existing knowledge of biosecurity, have really been staples in continuing a steady supply. No one has all the answers, which is sort of why we've come together to collaborate and share. And we've heard many options over this series of webinars, the results and implementation as people try out new things, struggles, everything from finding supplies initially, managing meaningful relationships with your staff and your clients, and that mental health piece that Stephen mentioned again in the beginning. I read a very interesting quote. Kelly Fredrickson, the CEO of Mullen-Lau, said that most consumers don't mind hearing from brands as long as there's a solution. When we're not trying to sell them something, but we're trying to solve something. And together, I think we all came together to try and solve any of those gaps that people are still struggling with and give them that torch in the darkness of who they might reach out to and how they might move forward. I do want to, just before we wrap up this series, take a moment to thank my PIC team as well, who have joined me for each of these. And although they're playing vital roles in the background, without them really, this would never have been possible. So I do definitely appreciate both Trina Fitzgerald and Ashley Hansberger for joining these events. And I would like to recognize all of the time from all of my speakers to putting together these pieces of information, to making sure that what you're sharing is sound and that you're proud of the end result has been, I think, huge for our industry. And I hope we can continue to collaborate in this way. I do have, that idea that sharing information, best practices, it's invaluable, and we will continue to do it. But as Stephen mentioned, it's a little tricky to get that human touch in this electronic version. So feel free to continue tuning in with us. We're going to keep trying different things, polling, breakout rooms, you name it, we'll try it, and hopefully it works out well. Today, I just want to kind of nail home that let's not get complacent. Hand washing, wearing our masks, physical distancing, taking our time to do things right, that's where we really want to be moving with this. And to just more than ever keep doing what we're doing, because we're navigating very uncertain times, but we're doing it with empathy and a solid understanding. And we don't know really what tomorrow or the fall might bring for any of us, but what we've done has worked, and we're going to continue to move forward, hopefully from this excellent starting place. Thank you again to my panelists today for joining, for putting materials together and putting your voices out. And with that, I will wrap us up, and I will hope everyone has a wonderful, safe, and healthy rest of the week.